So good news, Sarah. So remember when I told you that, I was going to give my new working progress to my critique group, and then they were going to be the ultimate factor of whether I'm going to
Mhm.
continue writing it or not?
Yeah, did it go well?
Unfortunately, it did. Now I have to write the entire book.
Unfortunately, it's good when people like your writing.
It is, but I was actually happy when they actually enjoyed it. So I was like, yay, and look at me writing something I know nothing about.
I have had a lot of fun in the last week. I've been going to different festivals and things around my area with my tea and tail shirt.
Mhm.
And do you know how many aspiring writers I have met just in the last week? It's incredible.
I know, right? And that is kind of the beauty of like the community. Like once you start seeing people, you just see them everywhere.
It has been a lot of fun, and I really hope that some of them are tuning in. I had one gentleman who had written for years, had put out a bunch of books, and then just stopped. And he said, I just don't have motivation right now. I hope that they're tuning in and just getting motivation, even if you know things that we're talking about. Like, be here, be involved, get that community back around you so you can start moving again on your writing journey, but also to share your knowledge because people who've been writers for a long time are so important to younger or newer writers.
100%. 100%. And I mean, that's why we have this podcast. So over the weekend, I was judging drum majorettes and I met one of the judges and we just started talking and I was talking about like how I've written books. And she's like, oh my gosh, you write books? And I was like, yes, but she's looking for like a writing community. And then I was just like, go listen to season 2. You will find it there, which makes me happy because then I can actually refer people who come to me or start talking to me to actual episodes that will help them.
In fact, the episode we're doing today is one that I wanted to refer to some people. So I'm super excited to get started into it. My throat has been itchy because of hay fever, so I'm drinking some hot chocolate today. Okay, I kind of lied. Yes, my throat is itchy, but it's for the whipped cream.
Sure, sure, Sarah. Look how I believe you. I'm gonna top that with a ginger, honey, and lemon drink that I have here. Because I was like, it's winter, but I'm not gonna get sick. I always say that, but you know what? Precaution measurements, I don't know. And oh, look at this nice mug.
Aw, dream big. I love it.
Alrighty, are we ready for this episode?
We're ready.
Hey ho, let's go. Hi, welcome to Tea and Tales. We are so happy to have you here with us. I'm Adeline now.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. We would especially like to thank CJ Hackland and Ash Kelly for joining us each week. This week, we're talking writers' retreats. And we have two guests on today, Jane Sanderson and Brian Veneer. Both of them are writers and journalists and have run 5 retreats since July of 2025. Brian is also a film critic.
Welcome, Jane and Brian. We are so happy to have you here with us and to talk to us about writer retreats. Why? Because I've never been to one, and so I'm super excited to learn about it. You are writers, so you actually understand the fundamentals of what writers need to be able to do retreats and to be able to, set aside time and space and activities to, get the words on that page that you want to get on those pages. And both of you have done so many amazing things. The writing industry is such a big industry. Sometimes people just think, yeah, it's just writing and you're writing a book or you're like writing it, but it actually is such a broad spectrum of things. So tell us a little bit more about yourselves and how you kind of landed on deciding to do a writer's retreat.
Okay, well, I'll start. Brian and I met on a newspaper. We were both journalists, and Brian still is a journalist. But I left after our second child was born, and became a mum at home. And it was during that time that I decided that I was going to hate myself if I didn't try to write a novel. I've always read voraciously. I had just had an idea. For a light bulb moment, it was a bit dull because I was doing the ironing at the time. But I started to think about my grandma, who has been dead for a long time, but was a wonderful cook. And her husband died in a mining accident, and she had to raise 3 children on her own in a time before welfare state and benefits of any kind. And so I wrote a story kind of with that as the kernel of the story, about a woman who was widowed early, had 3 children to raise, and so she made some money out of the baking and spun this historical novel set in 1903. I had no particular preference for historical novels. It's just what I ended up writing, and then I wrote another one and another one in the same series. What helped that book get published, because it's not easy at all to publish your first novel, or second or third really, was the fact, and kind of sorry to say, was because Downton Abbey was on television. I wasn't riding that wave at all, but the publishers were. They were aware of this Edwardian drama on television that was doing incredibly well, and then here was a manuscript landing on their desks set in exactly the same period. Complete accident, obviously. I didn't know anything about Downton Abbey when I wrote it, but it kind of got their attention, and it was a help for sure.
Jane won't say this herself, but they're brilliant. A trilogy, the Netherwood trilogy. First one was called Netherwood, and I always thought they would make a much better television drama than Downton Abbey, because there's more story, there's more credible story. They're really great.
Yeah. Well, it's partly set around the mining industry as well. The collieries in my part of Yorkshire were very much part of the landscape until Margaret Thatcher destroyed the industry, and they were all closed. So it's changed a lot up there, but it was a wonderful, fertile area for me to research, because both my grandfathers, paternal and maternal, were miners. My dad was a mining electrician engineer, so he would go down into the colliery to keep the machinery working. So he was wonderful at correcting all my mistakes when I wrote about mining, because although he was down the collieries much later than my book was set, nothing much had been changed. Ghastly experience as it had been in 1909. So that's how I got going, and then I switched to contemporary fiction, but that's another story. Brian's writing, your author journey started, as did mine.
We live in deepest Herefordshire, which is a very lovely county in the west of England, and we moved here from London, although neither of us are Londoners, but we moved here in 2002 with our 3 young children, and we started a very different kind of life than the one we had in London. And I found myself writing about it in the newspaper I worked for, which was The Independent, which is a national newspaper here in the UK. And I was writing a weekly column, every fortnight, I think.
That's right.
Called Tales of the Country. And it was just a sort of humorous account of our somewhat ham-fisted attempts to remake our life in the English countryside, and getting chickens and
making mistakes
and all sorts of things. So it was fun to write. And then I wrote lots of different newspaper columns at that time, and it turned out that one of my readers, who I'd never met, but he was a big fan, very fortuitously for me, he was married to the head of non-fiction at Simon & Schuster, who are one of the big publishers. Maybe they'd just been talking about how she was looking for new talent one night, I'm not sure. But anyway, he said, well, why don't you have a look at this guy? I like because of his jib. They made contact with me out of the blue, Simon & Schuster, and basically said, and I don't think this would happen now, but it happened then, 2004, we'd like you to write a book, and it can be about anything. I decided that the best option for me would be to turn my that newspaper column into a sort of full-length book. And that's what I did. So I wrote that book. It was called Tales of the Country, the same title as the column. It did quite well. A theatre company bought the rights and turned it into a play, which was very exciting. That went on a couple of tours around the UK, and that spawned a sequel. So I wrote a follow-up book to that. And that's sort of how my book writing career got going. And then subsequent to that, I wrote another 6 or so books, all of which in some shape or form were kind of autobiographical. There was one about growing up in front of the television in the 70s and growing up as a sports fanatic. And there was one about travel, the British on holiday, a couple of other sports books. So, and one about fatherhood, because we had 3 children. I wanted to write a book about the whole kind of journey of fatherhood. So that was me. So all my books have been non-fiction, and all Jane's books have been fiction.
But we did both start as journalists, and I think that's pretty key, really, because I think certainly for me, because I wasn't working, it was stepped out of the professional life. But I think once a journalist, always a journalist. I kind of wrote those books expecting somebody to pay me for them. And I'm sure that's because I always had been paid for things that I wrote. And also, you're not afraid of language at all. You're used to dealing in words. I may be a little bit undisciplined in terms of finding time to write. It's not my forte. But when I do write, I can write quite a lot in a short time. I think that's my journalist's legacy.
I think it's brilliant how the two of you really showcase how networking, practice, and having something that hits the market right now can all come together to move a book and a product forward. And so being able to just have a lot of different writing and different manuscripts is so important for authors who want to be published, that if you're just sitting on the one thing, that sometimes you have to go to your next one before it hits a market and you build the connections that you need. How did you all come around from that to writer retreats? What gap were you hoping to fill in this writer world with making a writer's retreat?
Well, I think the answer to that really is that our 3 children grew up and left home and now are back in London, where we brought them from in the first place. And they're all working and they love to come back here, but they don't come back here all that often. And it's a big house. We were looking for ways to justify, because we love it, absolutely love where we live. But it's an expensive place to run, to insure, to all of the usual things, and heat in the winter. We were casting around for ways to make some money out of it while still living here. And we didn't want to do bed and breakfast or turn it into a small hotel particularly. But writing retreats seemed suddenly it felt a bit unreachable when we first had the idea. I'm amazed really that we got this point, and I'm proud as well. But here we are, a writer of fiction and non-fiction, living in a house that can sleep. We only have small groups up to 6 people. And the other thing, that my other real passion is cooking. And so we thought we would combine this idea of a kind of English country house weekend, which also happens to be a writer's retreat. It's been a real hit because I associate writing retreats as like a yoga retreat, really, with sort of slightly austere conditions and lentils for your dinner and nothing to drink at all. And we're a bit more hedonistic than that, aren't we?
We've done, there are plenty of writers' retreats, and we sort of did a bit of scouting around before we started. Neither of us have actually been on one or not been on anyone else's. But I think we saw a sort of gap in the market where, as Jane says, that a lot of writers' retreats, and the one she went as a guest speaker, a guest author to one of them. And it was very austere, and
the students are on a cooking rota, so you're in their hands, and not all of them can cook or like cooking. I'm sure in some ways that is lovely if that's the sort of thing you're looking for, and it's probably very collaborative and communal. But we are used to hosting weekends here with our friends and big Christmases and the kids' birthdays. We had our daughter's wedding here actually at the beginning of the month. It's just one of our skills.
We wanted to fuse those two things: great hospitality and also the benefit of our expertise. We've got 13 or 14 books out, and we have got just decades of experience, and we're both, I think, good communicators. And plus we live here. And so I think a lot of writers' retreats, they set up in nice places and nice houses, but they import the writers. So the guests come along, but the writers are brought in for the day or whatever. This is very much our home, and we can also interact with people at any time. When Jane's cooking, she's very happy to chat about what people are writing or reading or whatever. So there's a formality to it in the sense that we run these kind of structured workshops, which people seem to enjoy very much. But at the same time, there's a sort of informality where we sit around, we have breakfast together, lunch together. Anybody can have a drink at any time. We can have an amble around the garden, all that sort of stuff. And so it's just seems to be a winning formula, and we're not aware of anybody else doing it quite like us.
Now I want to come there. This is okay. I don't like this at all. I'm yearning now. Thank you so much. Because I just love this because it sounds so homey and so comforting. And I think it's kind of sometimes the difference between like you going to a hotel room or a hotel when you are on a business trip versus you going to live in the aunt who lives in like a small town, like living up in her attic and eating her homemade food, which by the way, apparently you can make a fantastic chicken pot pie. I feel I will have to challenge you on that one. But that is so nice. And I think also, the same with podcasts, like different podcasts have different vibes. And naturally, different writer retreats have different vibes to them as well. And because that it is your home that you are opening up to writers, I also like the idea that is kind of small. Like you say, you only take like 6 people. Because I think also then you kind of get to give them more attention which sounds weird, but you are more available to them. So because of your background in both like film and journalism, and because you write nonfiction versus fiction, like how has your individual writing styles and backgrounds influenced your retreats structure?
I mean, really, only in a very simple way, which is that on the Saturday morning, I do a session which is all about fiction, and Brian does a session which is all about nonfiction. And it's up to us what we do. And we haven't yet had any repeat customers, so we'll change things up if somebody comes back having been once before. But
Quite a few people have said they'd like to come back, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah.
So,
And there's a difference between writing novels and teaching how to write a novel. We're not really offering creative writing classes or nonfiction writing classes. All the people who come have got their own idea about what they want to write generally. What I can do is share what wisdom I've gained over the years as a reader as well as a writer, which, by the way, is intrinsically connected. You know, you cannot write a novel if you don't read novels. You've got to be a good reader in the sense that you've got to spread your reading over different genres or decide what genre you want to write and focus on that. That's another way of doing it. I've got a whole document which I've called Aspects of Writing. It always starts with a quote by E.L. Doctorow, who said, writing a novel is a bit like driving at night with headlamps. You can only see 3 yards ahead, but that way you can get all the way home. And I just think that's such a beautiful analogy for the fiction writer who has to pretend to their publisher that they know exactly where this novel's going, but you haven't got a clue. You know, you're just groping in the dark. You know, if you get half a chapter written and it makes some sense, then you're that bit further on the journey, and it all eventually starts to fall into place. So it's just things like that for me. I'm not the sort of person who would stand up and stalk around and write things on a whiteboard and put people on the spot. What I try to do, and Brian too, is get a conversation going so that our guests around the table can make contributions. And I love that when it starts to go back and forth. I don't like to be the only voice in the room.
what we've also found is that, so as Jane says, I run a session on nonfiction and she does fiction, but everybody who's here attends both. Even if they've come here because they want to write a novel, they can still sit in on my sessions because there's a big overlap in the craft of writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and they pick up things from my sessions that they maybe wouldn't have picked up from Jane's session and vice versa. So, and actually we set assignments, not in a teacherly way, but it's all very much up to people whether they want to do that. But quite often I ask people to write the first 500 words of their life story. And even if they've come because they want to write something fictional, that's got people talking about their lives. And they quite often will read it aloud on the Sunday morning. And that's been amazing, really, how that has given us all an insight into everybody else's life, but also help people in that I can show people and explain to people how you can structure a memoir. It isn't necessarily I was born on such and such a date in a certain place. You pick out the most salient, most dramatic part of your life, something that's happened to you that is more dramatic and memorable than anything else. And maybe that's where you should start your memoir, and then everything else flows from there. That is something that's been picked up even by people who have come to write fiction. And actually people say this, and it's actually true, that people arrive as strangers on the Friday and they leave as friends on the Sunday. It really has been like that.
Yes.
Everyone we've done so far has been
It has,
amazing.
and you go from a slightly sort of awkward tea and cake on Friday afternoon with people who don't know each other, being very tentative and a little bit anxious, and very soon there's just a friendly conversation going, and to have enough trust to read out an original piece of writing to people who on Friday were strangers is phenomenal. I think that's what's happened so far.
Yeah.
I always find that very touching, very moving.
And we've had some amazing people here as well, some guests who have just got amazing. I mean, everybody's got a story to tell. We've had some great stories. It's been just hugely fulfilling for us and rewarding.
I love how you say that people are taking things from both, even if they didn't come to learn about nonfiction, that they're learning about it. And probably vice versa too. You come to learn about nonfiction and you learn from the fiction things as well. I think a lot of people do themselves disservice by saying, I only want to learn about my genre, instead of spreading out and listening to all the different thoughts and feelings and developing styles. How do you balance the crafting instruction when they're coming to class, they're learning from you, with time for personal creative exploration while they're on the retreat?
It's quite a short retreat, but all of Saturday afternoon is for writing. Some people have got a work in progress. And in fact, someone at the last retreat, her work in progress happened to be a memoir. So that was perfect. She went away and worked on that. But everybody goes away and works on whatever they want to work on based on what they've heard from us about memoir at this point. But also, I always make it clear that you can fictionalize your own life. People have done it. You can add color and texture to non-fiction by slightly fictionalizing it, or writing it in the third person, perhaps writing your memoir in the third person, so it sounds like a Roger Doyle book. It's full of your life because it is your life, but it could be somebody else. It's up to our guests. They're always different. Some of them just written straight memoir. There was a beautiful piece of writing that a young woman did about standing just off stage at Glastonbury hearing Paul McCartney singing Blackbird, and she just kept weaving lyrics from the song through the piece that she wrote. We're not taking credit for that, but I'm glad that we created an atmosphere in which she felt anything goes. It was really wonderful. So I don't know how much of it's us, how much of it's them. All we can do is throw in, what we know, reassure them that they don't even have to do it if they don't want to. I mean, I think, the word assignment can be slightly terrifying to some people. I think people think, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. We're here, might as well try and get something down on paper. And it's mighty satisfying when they do.
You can't necessarily teach people to have an imagination. There are aspects of the creative process that you can't really teach. Some people either have it or they don't. But what you can do is you can teach people how to structure words and how to structure chapters and therefore the whole book. And there are sort of ways in, and we can help. I think what we try to do is unlock. Some people come here not because they've got writer's block or anything like that, but they might never have written anything, but they're just eager to get started, and they feel as though they've got a story in them and they want to get it out. I think we can help with that, and we have so far.
Definitely. I spoke to that lady today who's coming in July. She booked for July. She told me that she's 82 and she wondered if she was too old for our retreat. And of course she isn't at all. She sounds marvelous. But she tells me that she's worried that she's lost her imagination and she wants to get it back. So we're going to help her find her imagination. Right, I think it's sweet, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
We want to hug her now.
Yeah, we want to hug almost everybody who's been. We want to kind of envelop them, and very often do envelop in a big hug when they leave. We just feel, after 2 days, we feel very connected with them. 2.5 days.
It's short but quite intense. We spend a lot of time with these people and get to know them very quickly. I just think it's a really wonderful formula, personally. I think it's wonderful that they can come and find me in the kitchen while I'm chopping and frying an onion or whatever I'm up to, and we can chat about my favourite book or their favourite book or how I, overcame this obstacle or, what they want to do next. We're just entertaining them for the weekend and talking a lot about writing.
We talk a lot about reading as well, and we encourage them to read. So on the Friday when people arrive, we give them a novella. So far, it's always been the same one by a writer called Claire Keegan, brilliant Irish writer. But it has to be a novella because it has to be something that they can read within the short space that they're here. And then on the Sunday morning, we talk about it, and not can sound a bit intimidating because it sounds perhaps like a bit like going back to university or school, but it's not like that at all. It's very free flowing, and talking about that particular book that we've all read has also just sort of led on to lots of other things and help people sort of explore their own way of writing.
Also, it's a book that slightly divides opinion, and most people will read it 2 or 3 times before they know what they really think about it. It's good. It's it kicks us off in a productive direction, and everybody has something to say about it.
I will say, writing short stories is not for sissies, because I'm just like, I have so many things I have to say. I can't just squeeze it into 6,000 words. Like, what are you talking about right now? Like, So yeah, people who can do that, like, kudos to them.
People think that the best way of starting to write is to write a short story are probably dead wrong, I should think, because every word has to count, doesn't it? I think you're probably better off writing a 500-page novel first and then trying to condense it. Personally, I find short stories kind of brilliant, but fundamentally unsatisfying. I like to sink into a big fat novel.
We've talked about like obstacles that writers have and why they come to your retreat, has there been common challenges that they come with, or has it just been each have been on their own individual journey? And if there has been, like, how have you helped them overcome it? Did you make them like chop onions? Did you make them walk in the garden?
Well, I think by the time they cross our threshold, they've overcome the worst of their anxieties, really. I think taking the plunge is the big thing. And one of the things that we have to try and do is convince people that we haven't even met that it's safe to come to us, which we try to do on Instagram and on our website and podcasts like this. It's a lovely
And
opportunity.
we talk to everybody before they come.
Yeah, we speak on the phone. Yeah. We've had lots of very different people, but I think the most common obstacle to their writing is lack of confidence, not believing in themselves as a writer, not calling themselves a writer, because they think you can't do that until you've actually got a book with your name on it in your hand. And of course, I don't find it difficult to convince any of our guests that they all go away feeling more like writers than they did when they came. And some of them are absolutely brilliant. We had one guy who had been an agricultural worker in Lincolnshire, joined the Territorial Army, which is sort of part-time army in the paratrooper division of the TA, joined the SAS, which is like being a Navy SEAL or something over in the States, the bravest and the best of the British Army, and now became an expert tracker of insurgents in the jungles of Indonesia. And now he tracks poachers to save the Javan rhino. This is one guy's life, and he's still only in his mid-50s. And you really wouldn't expect that guy to have the writing gift. And he didn't think he had either, but he knew he'd led a fascinating life. And he kept going on to his wife at home that he really wanted to write a book. He really wanted to write a memoir. And she paid for him to come to Writers Inc. Said, go away, go and make a start. And that's what he did. And he held us in. We were absolutely bewitched, weren't we, when he read aloud this remarkable beginning to his memoir. It was really beautiful.
But I think we also helped him because he has very vivid memories of being a young child, and he wanted to start his memoir there. And we encouraged him not to do that, but to start with these remarkable things that have happened to him later in life as a way of sort of unlocking the whole trajectory of the book. So starting there, but then going back and plunging back in time, and then explaining how he got from A to B by starting at B, if that makes sense. So, but he had a gift. He's made good progress.
He has a wonderful story and a great gift.
The other thing that we do is, when you leave us on the Sunday, that's not goodbye and farewell. We establish a WhatsApp group with everybody who's here, and we stay in touch with them. And if they want us to help them or seek advice from us at any point down the line, then we're very happy to read something they've written. And we encourage them all to do that. So we're in touch with everybody who's been here. Don't want to stand too grandiose about it being a big family, but that's sort of how we come to it. That's our approach to it.
I love that story. Being a military wife, it is even especially like, now I want to read that memoir. And do you know if he's continued to write it as he's left?
Yeah, we haven't heard from him for a couple of weeks, but as far as we know, in fact, I'll drop him a line. I'd love to see what else he's written. He began standing in a beet field with a hoe, with no qualifications from school, and his first day at work at 16 was in a beet field where his job was just to separate the beet plants down furrow after furrow after furrow. And some RAF fighter planes flew over in the distance and were dropping payloads as sort of exercises somewhere in the distance. And he was watching these beautiful flying machines and thinking that he was probably holding the most rudimentary piece of equipment in the world, whereas there was some guy probably, not much older than him, flying one of the world's most sophisticated pieces of equipment. And it really kind of floored him a bit. He was sad that this was his life. And then what happened to him happened. And when he was in the SAS, he was flying with the pilot who was co-piloting. And the guy went through some maneuvers, and they said, we've got a bit of time left. Is there anywhere you'd like to go? And they were over Wales at the time, which is the west. And he said, can we fly to Lincolnshire, which is right over in the east, not very big in the UK, of course. And he said, yeah, sure. So they flew over, and he directed him up to the beet field where he'd stood as a kid. And then he saluted the memory of the 16-year-old and said to him, look what we did.
It's great.
My goodness.
I know, it's so moving. It's really riveting.
It always makes me cry that. Oh, God, hearing it for the first time we were just absolutely, It's an amazing thing, that, isn't it? And that to be able to express that in words, that's why I love reading and I love writing, and I love the fact that he did that here. He could be our first famous author.
That would be great.
Ooh, that would be so fun. I feel like when you have people like him who are trying to figure out how to put their stories together, who have amazing ideas or amazing histories, there's quite a bit of pressure and responsibility to make sure that they both learn what they need to learn, but that their spark isn't squished,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
How do you approach giving feedback or critique to people at your retreat so that it is both constructive and encouraging for them?
That is a very fine line, isn't it? And obviously not everybody is particularly good at what, we've asked them to do. And some people know that they're not. So there's no point telling them that was brilliant. I think when they read what they've written themselves, everybody feels very supported. And we all know which ones were brilliant and which ones less so, but they're all original pieces of writing. I wouldn't say at that point that we would ever undermine somebody's efforts. There's always something good to say about it. They've heard all of them read out. They know where their failings may lie, or they know that there was something better about that than this. I think where we can be a little more constructive is the stuff that they share with us before they come or after they've left, and not in a room full of people. I think we had the very first one we did, there was a young woman, she'd started writing a novel, and I had a lot of feedback for her, and it wasn't positive. It just kept for me, the novel just kept changing from this to something else, and she wasn't spending enough time on the characters, developing the characters, making us care about what happened to them. And so because she was a feisty young woman herself, I was able to tell her these things, and also tell her that it's really important to punctuate correctly. I really find that such a barrier when, you know, when the magic that is punctuation is not there, you're coming across sort of hurdles all the time. She took that well. I guess you'd have to take a view based on who you were speaking to. She was a strong young woman with a very high opinion of herself. Well, not to be rude, she was. She was nice. She was lovely, but she was not afraid of the world, so she could take it. And she probably thought I was wrong. There are others that I would be much gentler with, I think.
We can almost always find something positive to say about anybody's piece of work, and if they can develop the things that they're already good at, we can help them to do that, and we can maybe just gently guide them towards improving the things that they're not so good at. We slightly tailor our approach according to their personality and how confident
and
they
their
are.
experience as
So,
well.
for instance, there was a guy who came here having written 170,000 words already of a fantasy novel. He didn't feel as though he needed help with writing. He'd already done the writing, but he wanted to know basically how he was going to get it published. Neither of us necessarily felt that that was going to be an easy journey for him. But what I did do was spend an hour with him talking about how perhaps he could, that's a very long book, 170,000 words, and I suggested to him that he could repackage it and target it at young adults. He hadn't really thought of that. And I thought that his book would be better aimed at as young adult fiction and also cut into 4. Go to publishers and tell them that you've actually got not one book of 175,000 words, but 4 books. And here's the first one. And there are 3 more like it. Our advice is not always to people on how to write and how to get better as writers, but sometimes also perhaps how to get published and that process, because that's a tricky business.
And that's one thing I do love about a writing community or writer retreats that you do. I think it's all about community because you can learn so much from other people that you necessarily might not have thought of, or an insight that they might have had because they've had this and this and this job that included doing this and this and this. So do you actually also write when you do your writer retreats, or do you just facilitate for the writers? And then if someone wants to come to your retreat and be a part of it, like, do they have to kind of do like an interview type of thing to see whether your personalities kind of match? Or is the purpose of the call just basically for you to just get a feel of the person, what they're looking for?
Yeah, that really. And to introduce us to them as well, and to get a sort of feel of what they would like to get out of it. I think if somebody said, I don't really need any advice, I just want to talk to you about agents and publishers, they wouldn't get much out of it because there's only so much you can do. Is that there's a lot of luck and hard work and frustration involved in that, and it's not really what we're here for. But I think, but also this is our home. We're inviting people into our home, and if somebody sounded like someone that we wouldn't necessarily want there, it's a little check really for both them and for us that this is going to work. It's quite an important part of the procedure, I think. I enjoy that bit, and sometimes it's what pushes them, into committing, because they've read about it, they've been following us on Instagram, and they've scoured the website, and they've taken the plunge to inquire, but they're still not sure whether they're the right sort of person, whether they're ready enough, whether they're clever enough, whether they're confident enough. And I think 10 minutes on the phone with either me or Brian is generally enough to reassure them that it's just going to be great.
It's a very useful device just to have a chat with somebody beforehand. And just as Jane says, just really encourage them. I don't think anybody's had that chat. Maybe one has had that chat with us and not followed through by booking. But most people then book because they find from talking to us that there's nothing to be scared about, and they can come. They're going to probably have a very nice time and in the fellowship of other writers.
I think if we could find another word to replace retreat, we would. I think it gives off a sort of vibe of something else somehow. It's not a retreat suggests that you're going to be meditating or left alone for long periods or have to take a vow of silence when you arrive or something like that. But there is no other word. We can't, if you say workshop, that sounds terrible. And who's going to pay to do that all weekend? It's a country house weekend with writing.
Love that. I feel that should be your slogan, you know?
Yeah.
So do you guys also kind of write when you do host these retreats or not?
No, we don't.
Well, Jane has no time.
I've got no time. I'm
cooking.
cooking. When the Saturday afternoon is key to me to get Saturday. It's dinner for 8 people. If we've got 6 of them, 2 of us, then it's a big dinner party. Yes, so there's always cooking to be done. So yeah, we don't do our own writing at all over that weekend. It's actually exhausting. It's by the Sunday evening we are spent. It's been great. Another success ticked off. It's full on, isn't it? We're concentrating a lot.
We give a lot of ourselves emotionally and practically, sort of physically, because Jane's doing a lot of cooking and we're making sure that people are fed and watered at all times and that they're comfortable in their rooms, and etc. So we're like hoteliers as well as writers for that weekend.
Yeah.
So it's pretty full on, but we really love it. It's great, and we hope it carries on for many more years.
I feel like it's a 5-star writer retreat situation.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That'll be great. We just need to get noticed. Still relatively, it'll be a year in July since we did our first one, and we had a few gaps here and there. Well, we've done 6 so far, so it's still very new.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what would you say if there was a writer very maybe a little timid or unsure whether they want to even look into a retreat? Some people get a little like, I don't want to be around people. What would you say to them if they are hesitant, and what would you say to encourage them to go ahead and share their work and to step out into a community?
I mean, there's a lady coming in July who fits that description. I've spoken to her probably 3 times since she made her first inquiry. When she booked, she rang me. She said, I made up my mind. I'm going to do it. I'm going to come in July. Just put me down. I'm coming. And she said, if I pay the deposit, then I have to come, don't I? I have to come. She loves reading, and she used to write as a teenager. And then she's had a family and she had jobs, and she just hasn't written for years. And initially she thought she wasn't clever enough to come to a writer's retreat. So I put her straight on that. You absolutely are clever enough. Even though I've said it's going to be friendly, you're not going to be forced to do anything that you don't want to do, but you'll probably find that you do want to do some writing while you're here. I mean, why not? You might as well. I talk quite a lot about Instagram posts and about books that I love and why. And Colm Tóibín kept coming up, the Irish writer, because I really love his spare way of conveying, not even drama really, but just the kind of the intricacies of people's lives. Very character-led drama. And the third time I spoke to this woman, she said, I've read Nora Roberts by Colm Tóibín. I don't think I'm seeing what you're seeing. And I said, that's absolutely fine. I didn't intend you to go away and read what I read. Read what you want to read. Even at the end of that phone call, she didn't say, so yes, I'm coming. She rang me up all in a bit of a tiz, and I didn't know who was ringing because I don't have her saved on my phone. And she just said, it's Kim, I'm coming in July, put me down.
I think we're pretty unthreatening people, and the format of our writers' retreats is unthreatening and welcoming. And I think the food and drink plays quite a big part of that, actually. So, and I think people, hopefully, as soon as they arrive, we put them at their ease, and we don't have any great expectations of people that, they don't have to do anything they don't want to do. We just want a very convivial, collective weekend, talking about writing, talking about reading, helping them where we can. We want to send them away energized, really, and with feeling
motivated.
as this is something, and also sometimes just new ideas come out of our retreats. So people go away with an idea completely different from the one they arrived with, and so they're going to pursue a different route altogether, which is great. I mean, that's in a way what we're for, to inspire. It's not just me and Jane either. It's everybody having a big collective conversation, and other people chip in with suggestions for fellow guests. So far it's been just a really, really lovely collective of people.
We're
Yeah.
meeting people we wouldn't have met before, and we wouldn't have met at all. And actually, I haven't put any of them into one of my novels yet, but it's bound to happen one day.
This is a sign we have on our kitchen wall.
Careful, or you'll end up in my novel.
That's right. That's a warning to everybody who comes into this kitchen that something they say or something
might end up.
might end up in one of Jay's novels. You've got to also have an ear for dialogue, especially in fiction, but also in non-fiction, but really fiction is such an important thing. And sometimes people come not understanding the significance of dialogue, and we try and help them with that. Jane's very good at dialogue, and so that's very important. How people speak, it's got to sound real, and the way that people interact with each other has got to sound real. And if you're writing a novel, although this is more Jane's territory than mine, you can't have one voice, i.e. the voice of the writer. You've got to have lots of different voices, the voices of your characters. And I think some people struggle with that, but again, we try and help.
Yeah, by reading examples of great dialogue, the way that writers can use dialogue to push the drama on, and the way the things that we say, the things that characters say, reveals something about their personality. And as a writer, it takes me a little while to get to know them all, the characters in a new book, but eventually it just gets easier and easier because you know them and you know what they would say in any given situation, which is always a great point to reach.
I love that. And speaking of great authors from that part of the country, I feel like the whole sentiment can be summed up with Irish author Marian Key's words, where she said, "The only wrong way to write a book is to not actually write it."
Yeah. That's great.
I want to thank you, Jane and Brian, for joining us today and for sharing your wisdom on the value of writers' retreats and how yours works.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure to meet you both. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much because I found you guys on TikTok. Yeah, so definitely go check out their social medias and their website.
It's writersinc.co.uk.
Ink with a C.
Yes, ink with a C. A little play on words there.
We like to keep things short here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on paper.
And if you like what we are doing here, if you love the topics that we are discussing and the guests that we have on, go follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Tea and Tales Podcast, and on Twitter/X and TikTok at Podcast Details. And then go to that purple icon on your device and go follow, share, and like. And tell us what writer retreats you have been to, because we would love to know. And then you can go help us go up at some moment.
Join us next week when we will be having an interview with the host of Between the Edits, Grace Aaron. Happy writing.
Bye.